It's Joe Waxman, and I am here with Virginia Harper, and she agreed to be interviewed by me. Virginia has been active in the macrobiotic community for a long time now, and she teaches and does other things. I don't really know that much about Virginia, but she's going to tell us about herself. So, Virginia, hi, how are you?
Hi, glad to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you. And Virginia, why don't you tell us your story? How did it all begin for you?
Okay, I would love to share. Well, it all began for me at desperation. I had been sick for 7 years in and out of hospitals with two very life-threatening autoimmune conditions that have been diagnosed. Took a while for them to be diagnosed. One was Takayasu arteritis, which is a mouthful to say that it affected the main arteries, and I had a stroke when I was 19. Oh. And then I got diagnosed with Crohn's disease. So I got diagnosed about the same time with both of them. The Crohn's, I had been feeling symptoms since I was like 15, but I didn't get diagnosed with Crohn's until I was in my 20s. And then by then I had had the stroke at 19. So it all converged together into trying to figure out why my body was breaking down. And finally I had names to my symptoms. I had no known cause. I had no known cure, but I had a name and some drugs that would settle my symptoms while they figured out what they could possibly do. I live in Nashville, in Franklin, right outside Nashville. At the time, I was actually living in Connecticut, and I was going to school in Knoxville, Tennessee. And so I went to doctors from Nashville all the way to Massachusetts, trying to discover what was happening. And all I got told was you have autoimmune, and I didn't know what that was. All I understood is that my immune system was decided for some reason one day to start attacking me. And all they had to offer was anti-inflammatory drugs because inflammation was what was creating all the pain, symptoms, and breakdown. So I started on the medical wheel of drugs, and when those didn't work, more drugs. I was told to curtail my activities, which was hard. I was in college at the time. I was a gymnast. The last thing you want to be told is, you can't exercise that much. You can't do things. I was also engaged to be married, and they had told me that not to get pregnant because my body, in the way it was not going to be able to handle pregnancy or even maybe carry a baby in the near future. As a Spanish woman, that was really devastating. To any woman, that's devastating news. But I grew up in a very close family, around the kitchen, cooking with grandmothers, and, it was just the family life for me. And I was not per se a career woman. My goal was to be a stay-at-home mom. So this was very devastating to me on many levels. It wasn't until it got to the point of drastic solutions presented by the medical community, which was drugs aren't working. Your arteries are going to inflame to the other arteries, eventually affecting your aorta, and you probably won't live until 30. And we need to start cutting parts of your colon out. We didn't have internet back then, so I was at the Vanderbilt Library looking up what all this meant, and it was horrifying to think that I was going to end up with a bag at my side if I lived any longer. And the drugs that were being introduced back then were chemotherapy drugs. So that wasn't enticing at all. I grew up in Chile. And in Chile, my grandmother went to the kitchen, to the garden, to the yard to get her remedies. There was nothing she couldn't, help with some kind of homemade remedy. And I started thinking back at that, and I approached my family. I said, everybody be on the lookout. I need something natural. I don't want to go this route. They're talking about beginning surgery on my colon. This is not what I want to do. And so my family did. And they were already very influenced by some of the earlier health instructors like Adele Davis, Dr. Spock. All those were on the scene back then. And this is what my aunt especially followed, a lot of vitamin therapy and things like that. So I jumped into that first, vitamin therapy. And it did help up to a point because I was so weakened and needed my reserves to replenish that it did help. But it didn't get me over the hurdle to real healing. I still had to depend on drugs. I still have flare-ups that would put me in the hospital for weeks at a time, come out weak, take another month to recover. It was just this vicious cycle I was in of weight loss, weight gain, drugs, and back and forth. Finally, my dad actually came across macrobiotics. He was still living in Connecticut. I had moved down already and started my married life. And he called me one day with tears and very emotional saying, I heard about this thing called macrobiotics. I was at some people's house and their daughter's on it because she's got the same blood condition you have. And it's working for her and it makes sense. It's food. It's weird food, but it is food. And it might make sense. And by then I was pretty exhausted. And I said, well, I don't know if, I'm scheduled for surgery in a month. I don't know how much I want to get into it. Because you have to try it, you have to give this a chance. So he actually flew me up to Connecticut, and I visited with Bill Spear, who had his counseling practice right there in Connecticut. Newtown, no. Anyway, he had his practice in Connecticut, so it was easy for me to get to. Interviewing and counseling with Bill was like nothing had I done before. I had been to all those doctors up and down the East Coast, and nobody had asked me what my bodily functions were. Nobody had asked me what my lifestyle was. Nobody had asked me, what my stress levels were and how I slept at night and what I was eating and how I chewed my food. These were all questions coming at me from Bill. And I got a little bit excited because we were going a different direction. And then the words that gave me power to go on were when he said, well, we can turn this around. Nice. And if you really want results quick, you're going to do it quick. And so you can postpone the surgery, maybe even avoid the surgery. That was my goal, 1 month. And I said, yes, I'm willing to do anything. And so he gave me my protocol, which to my horror didn't include any of the foods I was eating. None of the foods the doctor has told me to eat, which were low residue, low fiber, everything, milky and soupy and white rice and white, noodles. I was being told exactly the opposite. And I said to him, this scares me because this is what the doctors told me to stay away from. That will flare me up. And now you're telling me to eat this. I'm going to end up in the hospital. And he said, not in the way I'm going to teach you how to cook it. And so I was taught the intricacies of soaking brown rice. In my case, I had to make it into baby food because at that point, I wasn't even digesting. Water was going through me. Anything that hit my body would trigger inflammation. I said, okay, I'm willing to give it a try. So I went home with my plan, got all these weird foods I never heard of before. I had to special order half of them because we didn't have any health food stores. We had one tiny what I call hippie store in Nashville. It was behind a gas station. It was as big as this room here, and it had mostly seeds and nuts. And I walked in with my list of macrobiotic items, and the guy got really excited because he had wanted to know about these things. And I said, he goes, if I order them for you, would you then teach me what they're used for? So we had a great little deal in process. I would call ahead. He would order the food. I would go home and cook with it and then come back and tell him how I used it. Nice. And so that's how I was able to get my first misos, tamaris, you know, all the basic seaweeds I needed. And I went home trying to figure all this out with the recipes instructions that Bill gave me. At first it was easy only because I only had a few items to do. It included umishokuzu, including cream rice, including nishime cooked softly with kusu and ginger in it, all that I consider medicine to this day. Well, to my surprise, within the first week, things changed. Within the first couple of days, and mind you, my routine had been to try to get something in, usually an egg white in my system in the morning, I was a big tea drinker, you know, a regular Lipton tea, maybe a piece of toast. And then before I would finish, I would be in the bathroom, you know, 5 to 7 times. And doubled over in pain, usually having bloody diarrhea. And this became my normal routine on trying to adjust to my disease. And so the first few days when I started making the food that was instructed, yes, I ate it very slow and very fearful. But to my surprise, even the first few stayed in my stomach longer. I didn't have the frequent bathroom runs. And then one day went into the next and I'm holding more food in and I'm getting a little bit of energy. And my pain and joints and headaches, and I was making it through the day a little longer. All this within the first week. And it was amazing to me. So that food became my lifeline. And that food became my base to my healing. As long as I started out with cream rice, I can add new things to it and feel safe. And now I understand the whole process of the prebiotic and probiotic effect that the rice creates in your gut system, and adding the umeboshis and the kuzu, the alkalinity that was creating to stop inflammation. But then I had no education. I was just knowing that this was working. I didn't care how, but it was working. So 1 week went into 2, went into the month, and I was adding more and more foods in I never thought I could eat. And I show up at my doctor's office and I say, look how well I'm doing. And to his surprise, I looked better and I was doing better. I said, I want to postpone the surgery. And he looked at me, he goes, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm doing this great thing called macrobiotics, and it's I'm eating this and that and the other. And his eyes got really big, and he came from around the table to sit right in front of me and say, you have got to stop this. Oh, this Jesus. Is going to hurt you. You cannot be doing this. This is not scientifically proven. And I just was so shocked. I thought surely he's going to be as excited as I am that I found an answer. But no, he was warning me big time, and he wanted to see me more frequently. And if you're going to continue with this madness, why would you do this to yourself? He would say to me. And I just burst out in tears. I said, look at me. How can I not try something? Look where I was headed. I needed to do something, and this is working. Well, it's all in your head. Well, I don't care if it's all in my head. It's working. And I'm going to continue until it doesn't work anymore. So 1 month went into the next, and I was able to cancel the surgery because he did blood work and he listened to my gut. He listened to everything was hitting normal ranges. Before long, I started pushing him on getting me off some of the medicines I were on, because the side effects of the medicine sometimes are worse than the disease itself. Especially nowadays, that's my focus with people is digestive problems that are biologic medicines that are coming up with, and the extreme surgeries that they're doing, manipulating your intestines is just horrifying what's happening. And to think that I was able to avoid that totally. 9 months down the road, I was medicine free, I was symptom free. I felt different, I looked different. All of a sudden my life opened up and I had a second chance. And I embraced it. And I had been home so much, taking care of myself, taking care of my illness, that all of a sudden I wanted to jump back into life. So I did. I was getting ready to graduate from school, so I jumped back into finishing that semester of school, and I got busy really quick, which you know where this is going to go. I got busy too quick. I started taking shortcuts. By then, the health food movement was beginning in Nashville. We had 2 hippie vegetarian restaurants that made tofu and brown rice. And we started getting a few healthy processed foods on the market. And I thought I could do it. I thought eating out and my processed foods on the market would keep me going. And I would drive an hour to school in the morning, be at school all day, and then try to come home and take care of a family. And it just didn't cut it. I crashed. I crashed big time. I flared up. I called Bill. What happened? This is not working anymore. Well, let's just see what happened. And we analyzed, and he brought in the yin and yang, which I had no idea what that was back then, and I didn't care to know because I wasn't going to use it in my life. I just wanted the food items. And he started explaining energetics to me. Look what you did. You in between that, I had a baby. I got pregnant when I wasn't supposed to, and on IUD, and the doctor said, you can't carry a baby. We need to abort. And I said, wait. No, this baby is here for a reason. I don't want to abort. Well, we don't know what the drugs are going to do. We don't know anything. I said, and they took the IUD out really strongly in order to create an abortion, a miscarriage, and she hung on in there. And you met her, Chrissy.
Yeah.
So I've never had doubt about anything she wants in life. She's determined to do it.
Yep.
And so Chrissy was born, and at the time that I was just starting macrobiotics. And so she grew up from the very beginning, me making her formula the macrobiotic way, because I was afraid she was getting drugs through my breast milk. And so I went back and forth on whether to feed her, whether not to feed her. So I learned a lot. You know, they always say this macrobiotics experience, and this is what I tell my clients, this is an experience about educational self-care. I'm going to give you some points to begin with, but after a few weeks, you're going to be giving the guidance, and I'm going to be saying yes or no. But if they don't connect with what the body's doing, then they stay managing their illness instead of managing their health. And that's the key that was a light bulb for me. After when I was pregnant, I felt my best. And now I understand the hormone component to inflammation, the connection there. After I had her, everything started flaring up. And so by then I was started the macrobiotics. I made baby food for her out of the food I was eating. She was thriving. This is a little side story I like to share. I took her to her first pediatrician appointment. I mean, not for her first, her 1 year pediatrician appointment. I had already negotiated vaccinations, not because I had all the information I have today, but in Chile, we just didn't have that many. And it just didn't make sense at an intuitional level to put all this cocktail of vaccination into this little baby.
Yeah.
And so I negotiated with the doctor to let me spray them out. And do I really need that? Does she really need that? You know, so we negotiated. He was willing to. And so I spread her vaccinations out so she wouldn't have the harsh reactions. So I'm at the 1 year mark, and the nurse comes in and starts taking the checklist. Is she drinking milk? How many eggs is she eating a week? Is she and I'm going, no, we're not eating that. No. Finally, she put her pad down and said, what are you feeding her? And very proudly, I said, oh, I'm on this macrobiotic diet. That's making me feel so good, and I'm healing. And so I'm just making baby food out of the food I'm preparing. She loves it, and she eats real well. Well, she left the room. The doctor came slamming in. What are you feeding her? I tell him the same thing. And he knew my history because I had to find a high-risk gynecologist, obstetrician, and pediatrician because I was a high-risk case. And so that's how I found him. And we didn't know how the baby was going to be born. So he was that type of doctor. And so he's saying, okay, yes, you look great, you're feeling great, but you do this for yourself, but do not do this for your daughter. And he turned to the nurse and say, weigh her. And he turned to me and said, if she loosens an ounce at the next visit, and I want to see her in 2 weeks or whatever, I'm going to report you for child neglect. Oh my goodness. This is the first time I had confronted such a block to what I was doing.
Yeah.
I cried all the way home. I called Bill Spear. Bill, this was what happened, and maybe I am hurting her by feeling this. Maybe this is just for me and not for her. And he listened to me very patiently. And then in Bill's way, he said, find another doctor. And I said, but wait, these are questions now that I have. Now I have another responsibility for another life. And he goes, okay, go to these medical journals at the library again, no internet, and find these studies. Because macrobiotics has been studied, vegetarian has been studied. You need to know. And so I did. I spent time going and learning how to avoid rickets on a vegetarian diet, how to avoid low protein intake, how to keep your fats up, all that. Mm-hmm. And I felt like I was doing the right thing. Mm-hmm. And so I made an appointment with my pediatrician, and I dragged my husband along to sit next to me. And I said, I appreciate you bringing up those concerns, and I want to tell you what I'm doing in this way of eating that's supplying all the necessary levels that you spoke about. And I just went down the list. Mm-hmm. And afterwards, he said, well, you know what you're doing, so keep doing it. And I'll keep your eye on your daughter. I got the okay. And so I kept him up as my doctor through my second child also. Because it was somebody who didn't maybe believe in what I was doing, but respected it because obviously I had done my research and I was doing it in a responsible way. Yeah. Not just a fad. Plus he saw my record of healing and what I was going through and improving. Mm-hmm. All those things, this is back 70s. This is back, and my daughter was born in 1979. I mean, these were early 80s, that even though the movement was beginning, there was still so much resistance to anything that was outside the norm. Yeah. Anything that wasn't allopathic, you just didn't look at and feared it. But then there were people like me who every time a doctor would say to me, that is not scientifically proven, why don't you just have patience and wait until we come up with answers, come up with a shot, a pill that's going to help you. Mm-hmm. I thought I would not be around today if I had waited on that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And now that I understand the pharmaceutical world so much more, that's what I consider malpractice. You know, if ever there's malpractice, is in the way a medical is run and what they're doing to human beings, what they're doing to people who could so easily follow directions from a professional, from a doctor, to tell them, you know, this is where your test is showing up, but let's change some things. Let's get you off of coffee. Let's get you off of sugar and processed foods for a while, and let's see what improves. And then if we need a little medicine, we'll come in with it for a little while.
Right, right.
But that's not the process.
Yeah.
Now, we're lucky that we're living in a time where we're getting functional medicine doctors, where there are more naturopaths, where there are those doctors that have pulled away from the medical to expand the practice into a more natural practice. Thank goodness.
Yeah.
You know, because then people are more open. But my whole journey is interesting because I spend so much time at Vanderbilt Hospital, in and out, flare-ups, sick, that I really got PTSD of walking in that place. If I had to go visit a friend, I would break out into sweat. And I had to work through all that. And then it turned around to me bringing food there to people to heal at the hospital, macrobiotic food. Now it's gone full circle to where the head of gastroenterology at Vanderbilt has a team that has incorporated more natural therapies, psychological work with people. They have a dietitian on hand. So when you get diagnosed with irritable bowel disease, you go through those processes and end up with a diet to follow.
Nice.
It's far from being what it needs to be. The people bringing me what they've been told, and it's like, whoa. Yeah, they said, no, this doesn't make sense. This is hurting my stomach still. But now they have reached out to me to do a clinical study on the food itself and how it affects certain levels of Crohn's and colitis. Of course, we were getting ready to plan all that out when COVID hit. So everything's on hold right now, but she is sending me clients. This doctor is sending me clients. Awesome. She herself came to see me to see what the program was about, and had a hard time understanding how food, I mean, this is what her words, how could food heal? I give people medicine to heal, but how does food heal? I don't understand.
So absurd.
And I said, well, your medicine doesn't really heal. It just makes somebody comfortable maybe for a little while. But you know they become toxic. And you know they become more problematic as they go on, because now I'm seeing people who I need to detox from those medicines. The food heals because it breaks down into its biologic components that feed our bodies to either decide whether the body's going to regenerate or degenerate. And all your medicines are these food concoctions? I say, yeah. All the remedies I prescribe are usually food related. And so even though that's been a stretch for her, she sent me one of her most difficult cases. This poor guy, he was about late 50s, could barely walk in the door. He had 7 fistulas. He had gotten his colon taken out. He had gotten everything, reconstruction in his intestine.
Virginia, what's a fistula?
A fistula is a breakdown of the tissue, usually in the rectal area. And it starts off many times like feeling like a paper cut. It's very sensitive. You know how sensitive paper cuts are. They're very sensitive. So again, you can imagine if you get that around your rectal area, how uncomfortable, you can't sit, and it just hurts. And because of where it is, it gets infected easily. And they come from deep within, deep within the layers of tissues of the intestinal tract. They just don't pop up like externally like a paper cut. They start within. So eventually the infection's in there, and they have to put little tubes in there to drain it. They also put rubber bands around the inflamed tissue in order for it not to keep spreading. And those rubber bands, I'm told, are so painful and difficult. This poor guy could barely sit, let alone walk in, like an old man barely walking. So I said, you know what? I'm not going to do a consultation on you because you're in so much pain you won't be able to hear everything. I'm just going to give you 3 or 4 things to do in the next few days. If your body responds to that in a positive way, then we'll continue. So he was willing to do that. So I did a treatment on him while he was here. I do these food ionizers, where you put your feet in water and you ionize the water, and it allows the body to release mostly acids, toxins into the water. And I had him sitting on that while I wrote out what I wanted him to do. And just in that moment, he said, I don't know what you're doing to my feet, but I'm feeling a little bit better. Could that be possible? I said, yes, we're just pulling some excess out. So I gave him just very simple kukicha tea with umeboshi plum. I gave him the cream rice to do. I gave him a couple of kuzu things to do. And because of the parts of his intestines that were missing, you have to be sensitive to which fibers you introduce and which ones you don't. Because they're eliminated into a bag. And so that process of insoluble fibers, you really have to be careful with. But in 2 days, he called me. He goes, I'm only eating what you've told me, which in itself helps, as you know, getting off the triggers, getting off his animal products, the sugars, the processed food, whatever he was eating. Just getting off of that gives the body a rest. He said, I've only eaten what you told me, and I'm feeling better. I want to continue. And it was unbelievable watching this process. Meanwhile, the doctor's emailing me, how's he doing? What are you doing with him? I said, it's too early to explain what I'm doing. How to explain to a doctor that half of it is intuitive. Most of it is intuitive. Most of it is me looking at him, looking at his tongue, and deciding at that moment what the body needs. So being a doctor, she wanted me to report and write down like they do everything I was doing. But I said a lot of it's trial and error right now. All I'm trying to do is settle the inflammation, pull pain out of his body, blah, blah. She goes, well, that's what the medicines are for that I put him on. Obviously, they weren't working. And so it's been quite a journey for him. A month into it, he was doing so well, so much better. He was in less pain. He was walking normally. He had more color to him. He was able to go to his father's funeral, which he called me. And this is why I do the work I do, is because I get a call from him saying, I want you to know that if I hadn't been doing your program, there's no way I would even thought of the 3-hour drive and to participate in a funeral where I'm going to be standing all day trying to greet people. There's no way. But because of where I've gotten in a month, I'm able to do that. I'm taking all my food, and my family is going to be very on me to stay on my program. Because now, for the first time, he was smiling. You know, and of course, he's been to all my classes, cooking classes. He's got the education behind it now to understand what he did to his body and what happened. So then there's the emotional component. Then I remember I went through this too, of forgiving yourself, giving yourself a break, not beating yourself up, that you didn't know this earlier and you didn't do it sooner. Because we all come to it when we come to it.
Yeah.
And so everybody goes through a little bit of that. You know, oh, the suffering I could have avoided. You know, the surgeries I could have avoided.
Yeah.
Why didn't I know about this sooner?
Right.
So I've actually taken classes in Science of Mind, which is a concept of how to work with your mind and body as the holistic. And I know macrobiotics really connects that a lot, but I needed that extra psychology for myself to understand the feelings I went through, and to be able to guide people when those things come up. Because I've had people go into anger, I've had people go into depression, I've had people go into all sorts of program, you know, different problem emotions that they have to deal with. I do a residential program of 10 days where people come stay with me, and really is the most successful thing about it. Bill Spear actually did this with me, where he took me into his home where I got really bad. And it always struck a chord with me because it motivated me to really think about that kind of care. And I do it just once a month individually, one person, because it takes a lot out of you. It's 27, you know, 24/7. You're at it day and night because sometimes they're flaring up in the middle of the night. But this program is the one that's been most successful in showing people that it works. I'm cooking for them the first few days. They just kind of sit back and distress. The whole time they're listening and looking at things I want them to look and listen. Lectures, the recovery panels at the from the cruise, lectures, everything that boosts up their knowledge and their hope. Because just walking through my door, they have some hope.
Yeah.
But each day they're here, that hope has to be built strong enough for it to carry them when they get home back into their own stressors. And so as I cook for them the first few days, they're experiencing the changes. Pretty soon they're in the kitchen cooking with me. And the last few days, they cook a meal or two for me. So their confidence level has to be strong enough for them to be able to go back home and restructure their environment. Pulling them out of their stressors does a lot. And for the first time, I mean, think about it, Joe, when do we ever get 10 days to solely concentrate on ourselves? We never do. Maybe now during COVID shutdown, there's been a little bit of that, right?
Yeah.
Forced on us to be still and to do things differently.
Right.
But up to that, especially women just, unless they go away to the spa, unless that even crosses their mind,
yeah,
women come through my door exhausted from their womanhood. And so I love watching their transformation. That keeps me going. And in guiding them to accept and to feel deserving of healing. Because no matter how much we hurt and how much we'll look for an answer when we experience it. And I remember going through this myself. It's like, wait, this is too good to be true. Do I deserve this? You know, why me? You go through the why me when you're in the bottom, the despair.
Yeah.
But you also go through a why me when your life is handed to you differently and you have to be responsible in a different way. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where, as a counselor, a teacher, a guide, I really have to sit back and watch a person when they're hitting that place of, okay, wow, I got off all my meds, my x-rays, everything is showing up normal. Okay, I can actually use the word heal. And it's like, what do I do now? Because as much as we hate being in a painful situation, it becomes our norm.
Yeah.
I know how to act sick. I know what my day's going to look like on a Crohn's flare-up. But all of a sudden, I'm well. And I not only have all this time on my hand, I have all this energy that I don't have to put on me. Mm. I'm taking a medicine of laying down, of doing an ice pack on my head because it's splitting. And Bill really guided me through that because he said to me, okay, the goal is to avoid the surgery. I said, okay, I'm good with that. But what are you going to do after you're well? And I went, for 7 years, I had how many doctors tell me I would not be well? Professional people, head of their departments, rheumatologists, gastroenterologists, psychologists, telling me, sorry, you got dealt a bad hand. Too bad. This is your life. And then somebody was telling me what I might have a life afterwards, might actually get rid of this.
Yeah.
It was too good to be true. It wasn't until I proved it to myself that my body could respond to the proper tools to regenerate, because that's innate in us. So all I had to do was line my support system up to what my body was trying to do anyway. And that became kind of my mantra, because in early macrobiotic, the whole program was very Japanese based. Mm-hmm. And it was very heavy in miso and seaweeds and pressure cook this and pressure cook that. At least that was my experience when I first started with this. And as I got better, you know, I had become a pretty good Southern cook. I had a Southern husband. I learned how to make the best barbecue. You know, I learned some really good Southern dishes. Plus, I was Spanish. And being Spanish, I had all my favorite Spanish foods. And I wanted to delve into that. And so, but I was so strict because this was my lifeline that I wasn't fitting outside the box much until Micho came to Atlanta, Georgia. And we drove 3 hours from Nashville to go see him. It was my first meeting with Micho. I went ahead and set up a consultation with him because even though I loved Bill and he had guided me and all this, I said, Bill, he's going to be there. He goes, see him, go see him.
Yeah.
So my husband and I drove, and we had about 200 people attended. There was a lecture first, then there was a potluck, and then there was another program. And for the first time, I got to hear this man speak. This man that I have followed his directions to get well. And I need to share another little story here. Yeah. Before I met him. I had started the program. I was doing well. I was a month into it. And I felt a flare coming on. And usually my routine would be, as soon as I would see blood in the toilet, I would call the doctor. He would either increase my medicine. If that didn't work, then I would end up in the hospital, hooked up the IVs, come out 2 weeks later. But I started seeing problems. And I thought, Bill was out of the country. Bill decided to go out of the country. Why? While I was healing, I never understand, but he decided to go out of the country. I couldn't get him. But I was following all the instructions the best I could. And it wasn't working. I was losing a lot of blood. My mother was with me at the time, and she and my husband were whispering, we have to get her to the hospital. She's looking as white as the sheet and all this. And I said, no, not yet. Let me try one more thing. It was 2:00 in the morning. I was desperate. I was either going to pass out, go to the hospital, or make this call. So I called Misha Kushi's house. I figured he's the leader of all this. If he can't help me, nobody can. I called. Evelyn answered in her sweet voice. I apologized profusely. I told her who I was. I said, I'm Bill Spears, client. Yes, she said, we know. I said, I'm so sorry I'm waking you up. Oh, no, you're not waking. You're fine. And I told her my problem. I'm filling up the toilet with blood, and I'm doing all the remedies, and they don't seem to be working. What are you doing? And I could tell she was passing along the information to Micha, because all this Japanese was being spoken. And I could hear Micha's voice. So she came back with very specific instructions. Make a big bowl, a big pot of heavy wakame soup, and put this much miso in. So it's wakame miso is mainly what you're going to be eating. And then eat a cup an hour until the bleeding stops. And I went, that's it? I said, but I've already been eating wakame. I put it in my soup. And I already eat miso, I put in my soup. They said, no, you have to make this the way we're telling you. Okay, fine. I did it. By the second cup, I noticed my bleeding has subsided. By the third cup, no bleeding. And I was feeling stronger because I was being replenished. Wow. That right there, I think if I was at a crossroad at that point, that decided this was my path. This was it. It became a lifestyle. It became my way to regain my life back. Right. And not only did that help at that moment, but I noticed it bounced. I was more resilient to my healing after that. And it really, when the hospital would take me a month to recover from being in the hospital, doing the macrobiotics got me up on my feet quicker, replenished my blood quicker. And then I had to figure out what I had done, again, with the yin and yang, And so all those became such teachers for me.
Yeah.
My personal experience. And this is why I think when people do finally call me, do walk through that door, because it takes a commitment. It takes a commitment to know what I do and finally say, yes, I'm going to do it. Tell me what to do.
Yeah.
Then I can identify with them at those moments where they're scared, frustrated. There's, except for the fistulas, which thank God I've never experienced, or the abscesses that people experience now with these conditions, I pretty much have experienced everything else. And so it is a process of healing lifetime. And I ask people to commit to a year. And even though they're going to start feeling better and calm their symptoms down, maybe even show some normal levels at the doctors, I found that you need to go through all the seasons. Because in my time of the crash I did, that I told about earlier, was in the fall time. And I became very aware that fall time was a sensitive time for me. Mm-hmm. And learning now why large intestine and lung get activated during that time. Mm-hmm. If that's not strong with me, then that's when I would feel and go into flare-up. Mm-hmm. Through the years, as it's gotten stronger, it's been a more of a flow from one season to the other. But I still watch myself in the summer, going into fall. I'm very conscious of my pattern of doing things. And everybody has a pattern. Mm-hmm. And we identify that on the onset. When do you flare up? And a lot of people don't pay attention to that. Do you flare up in the morning or at night? What season? Oh gosh, I do flare up in the spring. Or I do flare up in the winter, And that guides me as a counselor to know what other organ systems we have to treat. It's always a dual, treatment plan that you do.
Yeah.
We know, and the 5-element theory, you have to support and you have to do all that. So it's been a place for me that has taken fear out of living, has definitely taught me through the year that you're not bulletproof living this lifestyle. I've had to deal with other things that have come up in my life, but I've done it out of conscious education and decisions instead of fear. Yeah. And that's huge. That's huge, to be able to trust in your body wisdom and trust that you're guided to a place where you're always going to know how to support yourself at the right time. And that's the biggest answer I hope I can give people, to end up doing macrobiotics to what they need and not get stuck on the healing part of it, because then you create other problems. Mm-hmm. And to be able to have that hope for living a life where you are going to manage your wellness, your health, instead of anything else. How we doing? I talked a long time.
Yeah, no, that was a great story. It really is, really inspiring. I love hearing it. It's very moving, touching, personal. I think that's the quietest I've been out of all the interviews I've done so far.
Well, you can jump in anytime.
Just had to sit back and listen. It was great. So that is about, I think we're approaching an hour.
Okay.
So, that was a great story, and I think a lot of people will find it very, very useful. Do you have any final words for us? Are you doing any programs? Do you have any books, websites, anything that you want to talk about? Yeah.
Yes, thank you for that. I'm actually updating my original book now, and it was the Controlling Crohn's Disease the Natural Way, that was published in 2002. And so I'm updating this at the moment, and hopefully it'll launch next year, spring next year is our goal. And the programs, I have a website, youcanhealyou.com, and you spell it all out. And that name came to me as such an appropriate name for what I try to do, because my idea is to empower people to really learn about what broke them down and what's going to build them up, because they don't need to be attached for me for life. And that's where healing really happened, when you feel the holistic healing. I didn't plan to be a microbiota counselor. I was happy getting my life back, being able to have children, raising my son and daughter. But people started knocking my door, and I had to take responsibility and educate myself further. I only knew how to take care of me. And so I went to the Kushi Institute. I went to the Strength in the Health program that your father puts together. It was one of the first away programs when Denny did it in Philadelphia after he moved back to the States. He was doing a program for the medical community. And I wrote him a letter kind of begging, I'm not medical, but I would love to, this program would answer all my questions. And so he graciously allowed me to attend, and it was the best experience. And to this day, I turn back to those notes. But what Denny did was giving me the confidence that you do build that wisdom with your own healing.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And so that's what I try to impart in people. I'm your guide at first, but later you have to make that connection.
Yeah.
You have to figure it out.
Yeah.
And then I'll help you, but it has to become that personal. So most of my education and classes I geared to that. And on my website, you can find some of those. Also, or you can get the newsletter. I put a newsletter out monthly with information for people. But we have quite a nice community here now in Franklin, Nashville, and a strong community. It took a little while, but we're here and we're here to stay. And now I think the macrobiotic concept is being embraced differently. People are connecting with it, are looking for it. I've always kept the macrobiotic name in my explanations what I do, even though my PR people have suggested through the years, that's going to turn people away. And I've always come back with, I found it, and the people that need it will find it.
Yeah.
And I've never lacked for clients.
Good.
And so, it is that, and I've learned to appreciate it more now as such a staple that it's been a springboard for all these other vegan, vegetarian, juicing, raw foods, fermentation, anything else that's popular out there. I've already been doing for 40 years, And so it's such a nice platform to speak from.
Yeah.
So now in this age of millennials and social media and all these young people coming forward and standing up for veganism and healthy eating, I'm considered the pioneer in Nashville.
Nice.
And I gladly stand on that because my teachings haven't changed. It's the truth that keeps you going. My book is considered a green book because it becomes appropriate at the time we're in. Mm-hmm. And that's what macrobiotics is to me. It's a green concept. It's a philosophy for life.
Yeah.
And this is the best guide ever. So.
Well, thank you so much, Virginia. That was an excellent interview and story, very inspiring. Just a few final notes. I have my website, themacrobioticdiet.com, which you can book an appointment with me. I don't have Virginia's healing experience, but I do have my own. And my mom is holding a class on August 15th, 10 a.m. webinar. You can book through my website. It's called What is Family Unity? So that'll be something interesting people can check out. And that's it, guys. I got a lot more interviews coming up. So once again, thank you, Virginia. Yeah.
I do have one more that since you brought up that class. On August 29th is a Saturday. Greg Samples, a counselor from Knoxville, you may know him. He was one of my mentors also. And I am putting together a workshop, online workshop, an all-day workshop on bacteria, viruses, and COVID, just to give some good information so people can make some educated choices. So that should be up on my website too. So thank you for that.
Okay, Virginia. Well, it's been great. Thank you so much And
thank you, Joe. Hope to see you again soon.
Yeah, I'm sure we will. Thanks. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.